All right, lots of traffic gridlock this morning with the Bedford Highway being closed as a result of an accident, a crash, whatever we're going to call it. So traffic is at the best of times on the Bedford Highway in the morning okay, but when something like this happens, it creates a real problems throughout the city as people try and circumvent the wherever the crash site is. So again, lots of frustration out there. People love to complain about traffic here in HRM, steady delays as a result of accidents, construction. One of the questions that I'll ask you is, how often is your commute impacted, and is it justified to complain so much about traffic here in HRM when you compare it to larger cities like Toronto and Montreal, where commutes are often hours, like literally hours every day? I think that oftentimes we lose sight of the fact that it's not that bad here, but again, I get people's frustration, like this morning for sure. But that's something that I'm going to throw out there and see if anybody wants to weigh in on that when we open the phone lines in about an hour's time. Lots of other things to get to as well, but certainly this story everybody's talking about, the search for two missing children in northeastern Nova Scotia has been scaled back. Police say there's little chance that 4-year-old Jack Sullivan and 6-year-old Lily Sullivan are still alive in the wooded area around Lansdowne Station almost a week after they disappeared. Police say, investigators say they can't comment on details of their investigation as the search gradually comes to an end. The children's stepfather says he was interviewed by police for 4 hours on Tuesday, saying they wanted to get more details about what happened before the siblings disappeared. So we'll talk about this after at about 12:15 with Robert Parker, who is the warden of the municipality of Pictou County. He was on the show earlier in the week, offering his comments on this, and just devastating story, and it's very, very difficult stuff, folks. Again, this story has gripped the nation, and look, it's again, speculation is running rampant. And we'll bring you the latest from Robert Parker. And if we have any updates at all from the RCMP or anywhere else, we'll certainly bring you the very, very latest on all of this. Tragic story. The Toronto Maple Leafs got it done last night. What a game. Beat the Panthers. They're up 2-0. I can't wait to talk to Cecil tomorrow, who gave the Leafs no chance against Florida. And look, it's certainly not over yet, but not by a long stretch. But the Leafs certainly look strong right now, folks. They really do. I know I'm not planning the Stanley Cup parade anytime soon, and lots can happen, but the depth of the team is what's different this year. And the defense is very, very strong. And you got the third and fourth line and just secondary scoring, and you got toughness, you got good coaching. It just looks a little different this year than it has in years past. But again, we shall see. Joseph Wall stepped up, made 25 saves in net as Stolarz, of course, was sidelined with what we believe is a concussion. And lots of excitement in Leafland for sure. The Jets lost 3-2. Mikko Rantanen had another hat trick. I think it's back-to-back games for the Finnish sniper. Yeah, he scored 3 in Game 7 versus Colorado as well. Just the third player in NHL history to record hat tricks in consecutive playoff games, so that's quite a feat. So the Jets off to a loss opener. Connor McDavid and the Oilers are back in action tonight, visiting the Golden Knights for Game 2 of their second-round playoff series. Edmonton doubled up Vegas 4-2 in Game 1 on Tuesday and looking to take a 2-zip lead in that series. The Golden Knights have never dropped 2 games in a row at home to start a series. So yeah, lots of excitement in hockey and in the sporting world for sure. And thanks so much for tuning in and listening, folks. Again, we got lots and lots to get to. I got a number of things in the pile. As I said, we'll open the phone lines in about an hour's time. I'd like to thank Vanessa Vandeness on the other side of the glass of the control boards, doing a fine job as always. Now joining me for a chat is Kevin Russell with the Rental Housing Providers of Nova Scotia. Kevin Russell, thanks for joining the show. We appreciate your time.
Todd, no problem, and thanks for having me on.
All right. This week, the Associate Deputy Minister of Service Nova Scotia has acknowledged some landlords in the province are abusing fixed-term leases. However, Gary O'Toole says the department needs to understand what the long-term consequences will be before any changes can be made to tenancy laws. Landlords are able to get around the province's 5% rent cap if they rent a new unit to a new tenant through a fixed-term lease. Heather Clark of housing advocacy group Acorn told a legislative committee this week that according to a 2024 report, evictions have increased 466% since 2021 through the use of fixed-term leases. Kevin, what's your takeaway on what Heather Clark had to say first off?
Well, first off, on Heather Clark, I don't know her, but, a 468% increase. I would like to know where she received the data to support that number, because as it was pointed out in the committee, that there's no data on fixed-term leases. So I have to question that number.
Okay. Would you agree that with the description that it is abused by some, the fixed term leases, that is?
What I will say, Todd, is that fixed term leases are essential for providing housing to vulnerable groups such as students, newcomers, and individuals with no or poor credit ratings, and who are working to rebuild their lives. If we were at the committee meeting, which we weren't, it would have been noted that they would have heard that about the thousands of renters who were able to secure housing because of the use of fixed-term leases. So, restricting or eliminating fixed-term leases will reduce housing availability and increase homelessness.
Okay, were you not invited to the committee meeting?
No, we weren't. And, it's disappointing that we weren't. For a second time in less than a year, a legislative committee discussed rental housing without hearing from people who provide it. And the result is a one-sided conversation dominated by activists like Dow Legal Aid and Acorn, with no balance from those managing housing daily. The committee, again, allowed a platform for some to portray all rental housing providers negatively, without offering space for countering perspectives. And for example, it was unacceptable for Mark Culligan of Dow Legal Aid to use his position to label rental housing providers as predators. This type of talk inflames the housing crisis and does nothing to find real solutions.
Yeah, if you're going to, I agree with you. If you're going to use numbers like 466%, yeah, you have to back that up with data, right? In my opinion.
Absolutely. Every time we present something to the public, it is, we present it. It's evidence-based. We provide the mythology, and it, it doesn't appear that it matters for some people to present numbers that aren't supported. And I agree. Rental housing providers, we must be part of the discussion. Excluding us is like holding a healthcare meeting without doctors. We do support real solutions like an emergency rent bank and stronger enforcement to protect both tenants and rental housing providers. And we support a rental environment where there are severe consequences for both tenants and rental housing providers who don't follow the law.
Okay, for those who don't know the difference between a fixed-term lease and a regular lease, just let everybody know what the difference is.
There's a 12-month lease, which is the residential tenancy term is a periodic lease. It runs for 12 months, and it renews annually.
So it automatically renews, and you can't, unless rules are broken, neither party can get out of it. Is that correct?
That's correct. There have to be a statutory breach of the Residential Tenancies Act to have a tenant to be removed or to terminate the lease. A fixed term lease is a lease that has a specific end date. That end date is known when the lease is signed. That that it will end on that date, and it could be renewed if the rental housing providers and the tenant can come to an agreement.
Okay, so has the usage of fixed term leases gone up exponentially though? Is this something that there's been a drastic increase?
Well, There's basically two markets you got to look at. If you look at the large rental housing providers, of the 12,000 units that are managed by larger rental housing providers in Nova Scotia, only 2.3% use fixed-term leases. And most large providers, including companies like CapREIT, Southwest Properties, Hazelview Properties, and Skyline Living, do not use fixed-term leases at all, 0%. And where fixed-term leases are used, such as by Killam Apartment REIT, they are often tied to supportive housing partnerships with organizations like ADSM, Shelter Nova Scotia, and YWCA. And for Killam, fixed-term leases are less than 5% of the 5,700 units they manage in Nova Scotia. If you look at the smaller market, the landlord market, you'll probably see that's where most of the fixed-term leases are being used. Not all, but that's where fixed-term leases are being used.
Okay, you mentioned that fixed-term leases are sometimes advantageous for renters who otherwise might not be able to rent because of credit. Can you expand on that?
Well, every applicant has to fill out an application form, and they have to demonstrate that in that application form, no different than going for a credit card or for a bank loan or a car loan. You have to demonstrate you have ability to pay. You have to demonstrate credit worthiness, and you have to demonstrate employment, steady employment. And if you're not meeting those criteria, it's difficult to lease somebody that doesn't meet that criteria. No different than a credit card or a car loan. So what landlords would do, they look at the person and have a frank conversation. They say, okay, let's do a 4-month fixed term lease and see how we do from there, and we'll go from there. And a lot of times, in most instances, at some point within a year or so, they will convert to a 12-month lease.
Okay, so let's say that fixed-term leases were eliminated. What would that result in? How might the industry respond to that?
Well, we did a survey 2 years ago, and our members made it very clear that rental housing providers would leave units empty, they would sell properties, they would repurpose properties, and they would stop investing in rental housing. So the result would be less housing, more homelessness, and a deeper crisis.
Okay, and a rent cap. Let's say that a rent cap was employed across the province. Same thing. What would the result be?
Well,
when I say rent cap, I mean rent control, like full-time rent control.
Yeah. Okay. What our survey showed that in 90% of the fixed-term leases that are in effect are used for reasons unrelated to rent control. What the fixed-term leases do are they provide risk management, they support first-time renters, and they limit property damage, and it helps tenants with no or poor credit history to be able to secure housing. So the reason for the use of fixed-term leases is unrelated to the rent cap.
Okay, I often hear stories. People call the show and they talk about landlords evicting people in order to allow new Canadians in, and they suggest they're getting large subsidies in order to do so. What can you tell us about that? Is this happening?
I have no knowledge of that, Todd. This is really the first time I've heard of that. So you brought something to the table that I can't answer. Sorry.
Okay, so I would think if it is happening, you would know about it, though, would you not?
Certainly would. I mean, but it brings up a point, though. One of the things that's happening in the market that's got to be corrected is the lack of data. We believe that the conversation around fixed-term leases and rental housing would be very different if the government had access to accurate, up-to-date data that reflects what's truly happening in the rental market. Residential tenancies currently have limited data. For example, there's no available residential tenancy officers' decisions database specifically related to the use of fixed-term leases. And when you look at the market rental data, it's only released once a year. And the often-quoted vacancy rate of less than 1% was released in January 2025, but it was based on a 2024 market rental survey that takes place in October. So, our current research shows vacancy rates have now increased to between 3 and 3.5%, but the public discussions continue to rely on outdated figures.
Okay, so I guess the fact that the government is not moving forward with changes, saying that they need to understand the long-term consequences, that has to be good news for your industry, I would think.
Well, we're looking for a path forward, just the same as the tenant advocates. But we believe the solution is collaboration, not finger pointing. We support stronger compliance and enforcement mechanisms to ensure both tenants and rental housing providers are protected. We continue to call for the creation of an emergency rent bank to help prevent evictions and keep people housed. And we support the use of empirical evidence, not anecdotal stories, to guide decision making. So what we're saying, we're available, our phone is here, let's work together, create practical data-driven solutions to keep Nova Scotians housed. We've got to stop the partisan political debate over housing, and we've got to sit down and find real solutions.
Okay, Kevin, appreciate your time. We'll do it again. Thank you.
Todd, thank you very much. Take care.
All right, take care. Kevin Russell, Rental Housing Providers, Nova Scotia spokesperson. In a rush to solve a complex mental health crisis, people in Canada have overlooked something simple, cost-effective, and proven to help. That is movement. We'll talk about this when we come back.
X.
In the rush to solve a complex mental health crisis, people in Canada have overlooked something simple, cost-effective, and proven to help, and that is movement. Joining me to discuss this is Dr. Lee Vanderloo, the Scientific Director with Participaction. Dr. Vanderloo, thanks for joining the show. We appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, so this is really not new, but we forget this sometimes, don't we?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, especially with regards to, we know mental health has been high for quite a long time, and this connection between mental health and movement isn't necessarily new, but I think it's, like you said, something that easily gets overlooked, or something that we don't always consider that we have, quote unquote, in our back pocket to pull out frequently every single day to help just give us a little bit of a boost in our mood, or to help relieve some of that stress.
Yeah, and at the same time, it's great. It's great for overall health, not only mental health. It's great for everything, right?
Absolutely. It is that kind of, not to be too dramatic, but that kind of panacea, and that's what's beneficial. With every step we take, every movement that we take, we are really getting just this multifaceted benefits with regards to whether it's our social and relational health, to our heart health, bone health, all the way to how we think and learn, and our moods. And this is something that's not only great for all those different health reasons, but it's something that can be gained by every single person, regardless of your age and ability.
All right, give us some tips that we can, because again, I think people tend to hear movement and they think they got to go to a gym, or they have to run a half a marathon or something large, but it really can be much simpler than that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's such an important point to draw home, Todd. I think, like you said, people, if it's automatically assume that if it's not happening in the gym, if it's not happening on a sports field, then it doesn't really count, and I'm not really getting active. And that really couldn't be further from the truth. And this is something we really want to emphasize, especially if you're new to physical activity, or maybe you're coming back after an illness or an injury, is that, start small. Something is better than nothing. More is always better. And what we want to do is just get ourselves in the habit of moving a little bit more every single day. And that can be something as simple as, taking active or public transportation, organizing a 10-minute afternoon stretch or fit break with colleagues at work, or even, family members at home if you're still working at home. Looking for ways to adding a little bit more movement when you're having, family or social time. It can be taking, standing, walking, or wheeling meetings or updates. So not just, as a fit break, but, just kind of stacking. So we call that schedule stacking. So, walking or wheeling around your neighborhood, either while you're watching, say, your kid's soccer practice or other type of sporting event, or while you're having a meeting. And so it's not so much trying to always just add something extra to your day, but finding a way that you can just integrate a little bit more movement into what we're already doing.
Yeah, something as simple as park as far away as you can from the mall entrance when you go to the mall. Something like that could make a difference, right?
For sure. And I think that's the thing is that, not only what do we sometimes erroneously think like where the movement happens matters, it's also how much. So oftentimes, we think if we can't squeeze in at least an hour workout, there's just no point. And like you said, parking that little bit of further away, so you're getting those couple extra minutes or couple other steps. And if you're doing little actions like that multiple times throughout the day, it adds up. And that's also one of the great things about physical activities, that the benefits are cumulative. The more that we do little bits at a time, even in smaller, more digestible chunks, it adds up. And if we're doing that every single day, you'd probably be surprised just how easy it is to integrate a little bit more movement and get on the way to meeting national physical activity guidelines.
I was reading your release and mood boosters for a season of change. And I thought it was interesting. You talk about how summer brings more light and good weather, and that's all great, but it can also induce some guilt, right? And people, if they feel as though they're not taking advantage of that, and that's I thought that was interesting. Expand on that, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the thing, sometimes that kind of fresh start effect can be contagious and get some people right away. And then for others, and I will say sometimes myself included, the spring also tends to be the busiest time for me at work, for example, with year end. And I know there's other people that are probably listening that experience very similar things that I find I do sometimes feel a little bit guilty. Like this should be the time I'm most active. And I find for me, it's probably one of the biggest times I struggle the most. And then I do feel guilty. I get more stress, and it's that kind of cyclical effect. And I think what I try to remember, and this is coming from someone who literally lives and breathes and studies and researches physical activity for a living, is that I know if I just take even a 5-minute break to just get up and take the longer walk down to the office kitchen or go to the further bathroom, just that little thing, when I come back to my desk, I'm going to feel that much better, a little bit more focused. And that helps to assuage the guilt. It also, helps the fact that actually taking the time to move also just boosts from a physiological perspective our overall mental health.
Yeah, and I can't stress enough, and I know that you second this, that don't overdo it, for goodness sakes. Don't go out there and try and do too much, because then you get sore and it's counterproductive and you don't feel good. Start slow, right? Is there a place that I'm sure that your website or direct people where they can perhaps get some tips on how to start and just on movement in general?
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely check out our website, participaction.com. Everything's available in French and English, and there you're going to be able to find a suite of printable resources, a huge library of videos that present a number of different how to get active at work, how to get active with your kids. Here are some great body exercises. They're short, so it makes it really easy for you to fit it in whenever and from wherever. Everything's freely accessible. And of course, you can connect with us and reach out to us over email or even over social. And we're always happy to share additional tips and tricks on how to help support a little bit more movement throughout your day. And like you said, the whole goal is that we want to start small. We want to slowly build up, because not only, like you said, are we going to prevent things like strain, injury, and all of those things that are going to impede our ability to get active continuously, but also it's going to actually add some additional mental duress and actually make us not want to do it. We're going to be so uncomfortable and view that as such an unenjoyable experience that we're more likely to build a negative association with it. And that's going to make it much harder for us to come back and return to the activity. And when it comes to movement, we want people to keep coming back. So choose something you enjoy, make it social if that helps. If you prefer to move on your own, that's perfectly fine. Just find little, smaller, digestible ways to get a little bit more active every day, and you'll notice that it'll become much easier, and it starts to become more of a habit and an autonomic action that you take rather than a more forceful thing that you kind of feel that resistance. And it's okay if you feel like that at the start. Just stick with it, and you'll eventually find somewhere that you land and that you really start to enjoy and find that sweet spot.
Dr. Vanderloo, interesting chat. Appreciate your time. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, take care. Dr. Lee Vanderloo, a scientific director with Participaction. A smartphone ban in schools. This is happening in Quebec, but the real crisis in schools is social media addiction. And it's like teen smoking. We'll talk to an expert about this when we come back. Social media addiction and kids. Joining me to talk about all of this is Paul Bennett, Director, Schoolhouse Institute, Adjunct Professor of Education as well at St. Mary's University, Senior Fellow at the Laurier MacDonald Institute. Paul, always appreciate your time. Thanks so much, and welcome to the show.
Thanks for inviting me back on, Todd.
Absolutely. So you're going to present these views on social media addiction and the effectiveness of school smartphone bans at the upcoming Congress of the Humanities and Social Sciences. First of all, tell us more about this event.
It's the largest gathering of academics in the country. There are going to be about 8,000 scholars, graduate students, and practitioners are going to participate. It's going to be at George Brown College waterfront campus. And I'm a part of two organizations, one, the Canadian History of Education Association, and I'm also on the executive of the Canadian Foundations for Education. So I'm doing a presentation to academics to alert them to some of the latest research and implications on banning cell phones in schools.
All right, let's talk about some of that then. Let's talk about some of the research first of all.
Well, first of all, my a point of view is articulated in a report I produced in July of 2024 called Weapons of Mass Distraction for the Macdonald-Laurier Institute. And there and at my presentation, I'm going to be emphasizing that we're controlling the wrong thing. It's not about controlling the devices. It's about addressing the fundamental problem of social media addiction among the smartphone generation. And what I'm going to point out is that as good as these initiatives are to ban cell phones, I don't think they're going to stick. I don't think they're sustainable. And while I applaud the work of the Unplugged Nova Scotia group of parents, I think they're doing a wonderful job. I think principals and teachers are going to become exhausted. Here's what I'm recommending: that it be adopted as a public health issue, that it be defined as a form of addiction, social media addiction, along with gaming, and that we apply the same approach we did with reducing smoking. In other words, what we need is a cessation program. What I'm going to be arguing is that, and I'll point out an anomaly here, it's banned in schools or severely restricted, but you can walk into any health authority, any pediatrician's office, and any children's hospital, and it doesn't apply there. So my first recommendation is it's time for health authorities, pediatricians, and children's hospitals to step up, support the teachers, and support an official diagnosis of addiction and get on with helping with a cessation program. Otherwise, I don't think all this great work is going to amount to something that's sustainable.
What does a cessation program look like?
Cessation program is basically age-gated, and the term, Jonathan Haidt's great book, The Anxious Generation, started to hint at that. In other words, you have different protocols and measures for each age level. Up to age 5, total ban on any access to smartphone devices. From ages 5 to 12, restricted or banned in schools. And then beyond that, at the high school level, and when they're in their teens, you have to be less restrictive and have an age-gated approach. So in other words, it's not a total ban. Now, having said that, I guess you heard that Quebec has banned all cell phones, period. And they're the first to do it, but they followed France. France did it a year and a half ago. So Quebec is always ahead on this. They were ahead of everybody. By the way, there are 10 provinces now that have cell phone restrictions. And Nova Scotia was a year ago in June. But since then, it's amazing who's joined in. Everybody's joined in. There were 7 when I wrote my report, And in June of 2024, Manitoba joined. And then in August, it was other provinces, PEI, July 16th, Saskatchewan, August 6th, and Newfoundland and Labrador just in January of 2025. So now we have 10 provinces with restrictions or total bans.
Okay, but you mentioned that cell phone bans isn't going to get it done because of, I shouldn't say I'm paraphrasing, I guess, but because of the exhaustive nature of implementing it.
Yes, it's a whole society problem. And we have no success restricting things unless the public health authorities, the hospitals, and those that have responsibility for the mental health and the well-being of children get involved. I think a lot is being expected of educators, principals, and teachers. And I was at a session which was called Screen Break. It was held at St. Mary's University about a month and a half ago. And the word from everybody there, 20 people from all different walks of life and in the education system, said that it was going to be exhausting to maintain this. They'd done a good job up until December, but as soon as the kids came back after the Christmas break, it was getting harder to implement. And so my point, and I was part of it, I said, well, I don't think it's strong enough. I think it has to be expanded into health authorities. And I basically said, well, the IWK is right around the corner. Can you not just walk in there and use your cell phone and there's no one going to say anything? I really think the health authorities and children's hospitals need to step up.
Okay, so if they step up, how might that improve the situation? When all is said and done, I would think that parents would be the most integral component to all of this. What are your thoughts?
They're overwhelmingly in favor of it. The Unplug Nova Scotia is a parents group, and they've had great success meeting with groups of parents. But parents are fighting an uphill battle, and I think without the support of these different agencies. Now, for example, I'm also recommending that social service agencies be involved because mental health addiction is a phenomenon. So, but I think that the public health authorities have the greatest capacity to mobilize everybody across sectors. For example, if there's about 10 or 15% of kids and teens who are so totally addicted they can't put it away. Even at night they look at it. Yeah. Now, they have got serious addiction. So my view is that's becoming a mental health problem. So why aren't mental health practitioners involved? I think it's bigger than the capacity of schools to manage it.
Okay, so again, I'm just trying to envision what this would look like as far as enforcement goes and how the actual implementation would go. Because you can't police what kids do 24/7. And so kind of paint the picture as to, let's suggest that everybody involved takes your advice and says we're going to move forward with implementing what you're discussing. What's it look like?
Well, let me give the example of smoking cessation. From 1999 to 2012, the smoking rate among teens dropped from 48% to 12%. Now, we all know that they adopted vaping, and it kind of came back. But the success of that, which I cite in my report, is a bit of a guide to all of us. If you walk into a public space and somebody says, put away that phone, or they say it's improper etiquette, why are you looking at your phone when we're supposed to be having a conversation? That's a matter of civility. And then the other end of this is, look at them. They won't put it down. They can't accomplish anything. And let's see how effective people are when they're constantly looking at their phone. Now, one of the things about the Nova Scotia ban, which came out in June, was I was there and the minister announced it. She only talked about one thing, and that was focusing on academic performance. She didn't even really deal with the fundamental problem, and that's why it wasn't called a ban. It was called cell phone restrictions in schools, and it didn't apply to the middle schools. And in the high schools, it's very difficult to implement. I can only tell you this. What I've heard in discussions with principals, professionals, teachers, is that it's going to be exhausting. Now, here's another thing. There's a new initiative coming along the pipe. It's called school conduct. And I believe that violence and curbing violence is going to take precedence over cell phone controls and restrictions. I wish it had all been rolled together, because you know how education can focus on one thing at a time? Is that going to be the next initiative next September? Let's look at violence in schools and disruptive classes. Are we going to ease up on the cell phones, or is that going to be part of the plan? I think it all should have been rolled together. That's my personal take on it. What I'm presenting at the Congress of the Humanities is an academic paper summarizing the research and trying to enlist the support of academics in trying to bring about some policy changes.
Okay, but I think you would agree that parents have a role in all this as well, right? I mean, if parents are constantly on their phones and addicted to social media, then I think that example speaks volumes. What are your thoughts on parents' roles?
I couldn't agree more. I'm glad to see the small group of parents with, Unplugged Nova Scotia getting involved. But I explained to them I didn't think they were going to succeed, because it needs a broader approach where they're part of it. But I will say this, there's been a remarkable change. The best-selling book in the world is The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt. And many, many of those readers that have made it the number one selling book in the whole field are parents who are very concerned about their kids. So here's what's changed since over the last 10 years. Teachers were resistant initially. They actually blocked the implementation of cell phone bans. They gradually realized that classes were untenable. They couldn't maintain attention. They started swinging around. Parents, during the pandemic, realized how serious the addiction problem was. They came on board. And really the last are the administrators and those that are entrusted with leadership in the system. So I think it's getting to be a groundswell, and I don't think it's as futile as it once was. I'm optimistic, but it needs a broader approach, and that's what my research is tending to show. I'm nudging people in the direction of treat it as a public health issue. Let's talk about cessation of social media addiction.
Paul, appreciate your time. Always a good chat, and good luck at the
great.
Congress.
Thank you so much.
All right, take care. Paul Bennett, Director, Schoolhouse Institute, Adjunct Professor, Education, St. Mary's University, Senior Fellow at the Laurier MacDonald Institute. King Charles is coming to Canada to deliver the throne speech. We'll chat with Barry McKenzie, Monarchist League of Canada, about this when we come back.
Facts.
King Charles is coming to Canada to deliver the throne speech in Ottawa at the end of the month. Joining me to discuss all of this is Barry McKenzie, Monarchist League of Canada. Barry, thanks for joining the show as always.
Always a pleasure, Todd.
So I guess when it comes to Mark Carney, it helps to have some connections, eh?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is a significant moment, and it brings to fruition, I suppose, any desire people had to see the King come to Canada at all since his coronation, which of course has been delayed by his ongoing treatment for his cancer diagnosis. But this particular invitation, this particular moment, is probably more significant than most people hoped for.
Do you think that it was Mark Carney that made it happen, obviously with his connections with England?
I think that had Mr. Trudeau made the request when he was Prime Minister, the answer would probably still have been yes. Mr. Carney certainly seems to have lots of friends in the UK, but ultimately this is a decision between a Canadian Prime Minister and his boss. So I think that the time was right here. It certainly doesn't hurt that they're on good terms and have a good relationship. But I suspect that this was something that Mr. Trudeau would have tried to do had he had the opportunity, or at least at the very least, I would have hoped that he would have made the same effort had he been in the same position.
When's the last time the not the King, but obviously the Queen Elizabeth delivered a throne speech in Canada?
1977. So
Wow.
It's been almost 50 years, and that was only the second time that it had ever happened. It happened before that in 1957 at the invitation of Mr. Diefenbaker. So so this is a pretty significant moment. Something that doesn't happen often, regrettably. As a monarchist, it's regrettable it doesn't happen more often, because this is the biggest reminder that we'll have in the foreseeable future that he is indeed the King. So. And the King of Canada, not just a borrowed king as people often mistake him for. So it's going to be a big moment, and it comes at a time when I think Canada needs that boost and a reminder to the international community, particular to some of our closest neighbors, that we are a sovereign nation and that we can that we can stand up for ourselves when we need to, because there's certainly a lot of that behind what's happening.
Why do you think now is the right time to do this?
I think it's a reminder to Mr. Trump, that Canada is a sovereign nation, and also in this case, I think because of despite all his other misunderstandings about how the global political system seems to work, he seems to be a great admirer of monarchy. And in all these sort of moves, whether it's all just window dressing or not, but in all these moves and talking about a 51st state, I think it's an important reminder that Canada already has a head of state. And perhaps the fact that Mr. Trump is a great admirer of the king may do some good towards, dispelling what sort of crazy ideas he might have about annexation, if we want to drag up that dirty old word. So I think that's in many ways what's behind this. Perhaps Mr. Trudeau had it in his mind, or Mr. Carney would have, in different circumstances, had it in their mind to have the king open Parliament, because that particularly because he's been newly crowned, that is a sort of almost a culmination of that, exchange of power between his mother and himself. But this, comes at a very useful time, we hope, in terms of international relations.
What are Canadians' attitudes towards the monarchy like these days? What's the data saying? Is there new data?
There doesn't seem to have been much. No, I mean, I suspect, in the lead up to Victoria Day, we usually have one poll or another that will come out and identify things. I think it'll be very interesting to see what polling data is available right now, Todd, because we've seen an interesting reaction across the country in terms of nationalism in the last number of months after all of this saber rattling in the U.S. about annexation. And whether it's just talk or not, it doesn't really matter. It seems to have brought Canadians together in an interesting sense. And it's been interesting to watch, individual reactions in my own sort of circle amongst people who are not necessarily monarchists to this particular bit of news. And so, if anything, I think it'll do something for people's understanding, certainly of how the monarchy functions in Canada, and also perhaps their recognition that it can be useful, and particularly in these moments where soft power is really important.
For those who feel that it's run its course, what's your mission statement? What's your argument for the need for the monarchy moving forward?
You always find a way to work in a question like that, Todd. I appreciate that. I always appreciate it.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's in moments like these, that we recognize, that having a leader, having a head of state who is above that sort of political fray and not engaged in those sort of debates and tainted by all the nastiness that have become modern elections. I think that we have this person at the top, and that there is, that our national allegiance is not connected to a particular party, and we're seeing the sort of the great disadvantage to a system in which the allegiance is to a person. We see it happening in the U.S. today. So I think more than ever, it should be a reminder of how valuable our system is. It not only links us to our history, sure, that's great, but I think its utility in the present as a non-political sort of center for our national life is really important, and something that we probably need now more than we have for quite a while.
What are people's views of Camilla? Have they softened over the years? I would think they must have.
Oh, they definitely have. Yeah. I mean, it's like any situation like this, right? I mean, everyone has a cousin whose second wife we didn't like as well, or a cousin whose second husband we didn't like, and you realize over time that this is the woman that's made him happy, and she's throughout his illness, I think she's been remarkable in the amount of work that she's undertaken on his behalf, and she's been the one out there flying the flag. And people recognize that she's a hard worker, she's a genuine sort of person, and it's nice that she'll have this opportunity, however brief it's going to be, to sort of be on the ground in Canada for people to see her in person again, and be a reminder that she's not the boogeyman of the 1980s and then the early 90s that the press made her out to be. And
King Charles' health, any update on that, or do you know no more than I know?
No, I wish I could tell you I had an inside track there, but certainly, this is a big international trip, for a man who's 75 years old. It's not even if he is just here overnight. So hopefully that's a good sign, but definitely there's reason to be concerned with any cancer diagnosis at any age, and we're just hopeful that things they're in a good place, and he's able to continue to do the good work that he's been doing, and continue to represent us well, and that we'll be able to see him on a more extended basis in the not too distant future.
Barry, I always appreciate your time in our chat. Thanks so much.
Likewise, Todd. All the best.
All right, take care. Barry McKenzie, Monarchist League of Canada. Now we've got some time for you. What is on your mind today on this Thursday? The way to reach us, 902-405-6000. What would you like to get into today? Again, 902-405-6000. Perhaps you might want to talk about the king coming. Do you care or not? Also, a big international story, of course. No new pope has been elected yet after black smoke poured out of the Sistine Chapel's chimney. 133 cardinals will later return to the chapel in Vatican City for the afternoon voting session. Do you care? Are you paying attention to this? And is it getting far too much attention? Or, again, whatever else you'd like to talk about. 902-405-6000. Your calls when we come back. All right, time to take your calls. The way to reach us is 902-405-6000. Again, 902-405-6000. What would you like to get into today? Lots of talk yesterday about Mark Carney, the Prime Minister, and his trip to the White House and the Oval Office and his interaction with Donald Trump. And I would say that the majority of callers yesterday and emails that I received were supportive of Carney and felt as though he did what all that you could expect him to do. And that was kind of my takeaway as well. I know that some people wanted him to go in there and be guns blazing and full of vitriol, and that didn't happen. Instead, Carney was measured, I would say diplomatic, and did all that you could expect him to do under those circumstances. Again, I said it yesterday, I think that any type of aggressiveness, any type of pushback against Donald Trump in that environment would have resulted in chaos and in disaster. I empathize and sympathize with people who wanted somebody to go in there and stick up for the country. I get that. And I guess some would say that he did with his response, saying that Canada's not for sale, and that was obviously a well-prepared line. And that's good. He should have been prepared for that, and he delivered it well. But I'm not sure what he could have done any differently, if anything, as difficult of a situation that it was going into the Lions Den. Again, not everybody agreed with that. Some of you have disagreed with it, and certainly welcome your comments. What are your thoughts on that moving forward and the relationship between Carney and Trump and Canada and the U.S.? Something you can talk about, 902-405-6000. It was a more than challenging commute this morning for people using the Bedford Highway. Around 8:30, police responded to an accident, actually a little before that, and the road remained closed in both directions for quite a long time, between Kearney Lake Road and Flamingo Drive, rather. People love to complain here in HRM about traffic, steady delays as a result of accidents, construction. How often is your commute impacted? Does it happen weekly? Is it too often? Is it justified? Or compared to larger cities like Toronto, is it really not worth complaining about the traffic in HRM when all is said and done? Do we spend too much time complaining about traffic in a city where the average commute is usually about half an hour, 25 minutes, not much more than that? And that's at peak times. So what are your thoughts on that? 902-405-6000. Again, we talked about the Pope. No new Pope has been elected as of yet, as the world looks to the, shouldn't say the world, as many in the world look to the chimney atop the Sistine Chapel to look for white smoke. And look, 133 cardinals are the ones deciding this through secret ballot vote. Are you interested in this? Is this something that you're paying attention to? If so, why? And is this getting too much attention? In your opinion, in a time in which the world is gripped with so much calamity, so many struggles, so much trial, does it seem outdated and a little silly to be looking for the white smoke coming from the chimney atop the Sistine Chapel? What are your thoughts on that? 902-405-6000. Again, whatever else you'd like to get into. 902-405-6000. Let's kick it off with Peter. Hello, Peter.
Hi, Todd. How are you today?
I'm well, you?
Good, sir. Good. I just have a couple of comments. One comment is, I don't know how you do it. You asked the guy that you had on about the cell phones. You asked him a direct question about how his study was going to help fix the problem. And I don't think he gave you a single answer on it. So good for you for not losing your mind on that.
Oh, okay.
He did the study. He wants the study known, but no solutions. So I don't know who he expects to fix it, but
well, that's
anyway.
just it, Peter. I mean, how the hell do you fix it, right? I mean, to me, it starts with parents. That's where it's got to start. And the example of parents. If a parent has a phone in their face constantly and they're addicted to this stuff, then how do you expect the kids to not do the same thing?
I agree. And one thing I see in my workplace is something that's becoming a pandemic, if you want. The cell phone use by the young people coming in, it's uncontrollable, and it makes them non-productive, and they don't realize it, they don't see it, and they don't care. Not all of them.
Yeah.
Not blanket statements here, but a lot of them, it is a problem. Yeah. The other comment I had, I thought Carney did wonderful in the Oval Office with that guy. Like there is no right way to treat that guy because he is the definition of chaos. Yeah. And I thought Carney handled himself well and represented Canada very well. And
I can't help but think, Peter, if he had gone in there with any type of aggressive attitude, it would have descended into chaos very quickly.
Yeah, and he also didn't kiss the ring, which didn't allow Trump to pull his bully routine like he does with all the other ones, you know. So I thought he represented us fantastically, and I think in the future he's probably going to be the guy to handle this guy if he can keep doing that. I mean, Trump is a hard fellow to deal with on any basis, but yeah.
Peter, what do you think? How do you think Pierre Poilievre would have done in that environment?
Listen, I'm a conservative at heart. Pierre Poilievre is not a conservative. He's a problem for Canada. I think he would have went in there with that smug attitude that he has with everybody else, and I think Trump would have jumped all over that, and I don't think it would have went well. Okay. I really think that would have been a disaster.
Okay, Peter, appreciate the call. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
All right, take care. 902-405-6000. Mike wants to talk about cell phones. Go hello, Mike.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm well, you?
Good. I just want to say, when I was growing up, my parents made the rules. We had to follow them whether we liked them or not. Should be the same in school. If they think cell phones are bad, and I never thought they were good anyway, then make the rule and that's it. We were never less than 40 kids in our classes when we went to school, but that wasn't a problem because there was discipline. If you got in trouble in school, then you were in trouble home. I remember getting the strap by being in the wrong place at the wrong time when I got home and told my dad that. He said, well, maybe you won't be in the wrong place at the wrong time when your buddy decides to hold up the liquor store. There's lessons in everything, in my opinion.
Well, I suppose, but that said, I also think that authority can be abused and has been abused in the past. So it is a bit of a balancing act. Do you not agree, Mike, or what are your thoughts?
Yeah, no question. But I mean, my wife's from England, and you see the kids over there. They're smartly dressed. They're in uniforms. They're not fighting over because buddy's got $200 pair of sneakers. And you know what? They follow it from the day they start going to school. You got to set the standards at some point and just follow them. There are rules in society, and if no cell phones in school is one, then it's one.
Yeah, I hear you, Mike. Thanks for the call, pal.
Thank you.
All right, take care. 902-405-6000. Look, I often hear that there's not enough discipline for kids today and in schools today. And I'm not disagreeing with that entirely. I think that there's a balance, right? Because I remember being in elementary school where the teacher was literally able to grab you and yank you by the ear, and it happened because it happened to me a number of times. The teacher would walk up behind you and she grabbed me by the ear and yanked your ear. And for those people who are younger, much younger than myself and some of our listeners, the strap was a real thing. It happened. You got the strap at school. And I don't know that, as a matter of fact, I would say that is not anything I would want to revert back to, where a principal or a teacher has the authority to smack your kid with a strap. Now, were we more disciplined? Sure we were. But so are prisoners at Alcatraz more disciplined. I don't know that that's the way we want to go. But these questions, it's very difficult, folks. I wouldn't want to be a teacher today. These are being a teacher is very, very tough. And violence in schools is a real thing. I don't know what the answers are, but I don't think having teachers have the opportunity to hit kids is, as a matter of fact, I would say that that's definitely not the answer. 902-405-6000. Bill's giving us a call. Hello, Bill.
Oh, I got the answer for that one. That's not why I called, but I'll tell you the answer for that one, Todd, is to have you don't go to school. In other words, you don't get out of your house and you go down the road and you get in the class and you go all through that. You don't do that. This all got to be done at home. In other words, you're on the computer at home and you're not in a fight with the teacher, nothing like that. And if you don't want to learn what's going to be in school and so on and so forth, well, you don't pass, so away you go. Okay, that's that one. What do you think?
Well, you're saying have no schools? Is that what you're saying?
No, it's all done at home. It's computer.
Well, that's not, Bill. I don't think that's realistic, considering a lot of parents have to work, and you have single parents, and there's and you've got all types of challenges with offloading that to parents. I don't know that I would agree with that. I would have to say I disagree.
Well,
with it.
Parents are more gone to work.
Well, I know, but so you're going to leave a 9-year-old at home to go to school at home on the computer?
Well, you got a point there, but anyway, that's I think to where it's coming from. That eventually, what I actually called you about was this thing about Alberta, all charged up and wanting to maybe get away from Canada and break it up.
Yeah,
this is serious stuff. The thing that I find is, I don't know who's got the answers for this one, but okay, let's put it this way. Where does England or Great Britain fit into this here? Can any province just automatically say we've had enough? I mean, where does England fit in here to have control? I mean, they give their little spiel for in front of the flag up there in Ottawa. Here's a good one for you.
Mm-hmm.
Crown land.
Yeah.
Why is the province property called Crown land? Is that Crown land England, Great Britain?
Well,
okay, so the same way Point Pleasant Park.
Yeah.
That's some kind of British something. Won't even sign the lease. It seems like one way they're supposed to be in control, Great Britain or England, over Canada, and the next thing you know, they're not. So I don't know where we're at on this one. If any province can succeed or not.
I don't know. Constitutionally, I don't know what's required for secession. I can't answer that question. Perhaps I should get somebody on the show that certainly could. Some constitutional expert, an expert on the charter. Wayne McKay would be one of them, but I'm not sure. The whole idea of autonomy and a province wanting to leave and what it needs to be, what mechanism needs to be utilized in order for that to happen. That's a good question, Bill. I don't have the answer for you.
Well, just an example of province is it's got this land. Is it English land? Crown land.
Yeah,
Why is it called Crown land?
Yeah. Well, it's Crown land. Crown land to me just means federally owned. That's what to me that I don't think that the idea of linking that back to Britain to me is irrelevant. That they don't have any say over what happens on our Crown land anymore.
Well, they certainly got Point Pleasant Park. Well, they did have.
Well, I understand what you're saying, but again, Crown land is federal land, and the federal government has the say over what happens with Crown land.
Shouldn't be calling it Crown land then.
Well, that's because of the monarchy, and that's because of the system in which we are governed by. But it's just a word game of semantics, Bill, in my opinion. But on separation, pal, I don't know what the mechanisms are. And I don't know if Alberta wants to separate. Do they have the autonomy to do so? I don't know. These are good questions, though.
Well, you're doing a good job, Todd. I know sometimes I don't know how you're able to handle all the game when they come at you there. no matter what it is, you seem to be able to hang in there with them. Anyway, doing a good job.
Okay, Bill. Thanks, bud. Take care.
Thanks.
Okay, 902-405-6000. Get some open lines for you folks. What is on your mind today? Again, 902-405-6000. The open hour continues when we come back. All right, continuing with your calls, 902-405-6000. That's the way to reach us. Again, 902-405-6000. Quick email from Darren, then back to the phones. Darren says, when I was in elementary school, a nun grabbed me by the ear and knocked my glasses off. Imagine a teacher doing that today. You would be arrested. But not being able to discipline kids in school has gone way too far, leading to all the teacher abuse and violence. For instance, the stabbing at CP Allen a couple of years ago. It's a whole different generation out there these days. And it's scary. And look, I agree that I often talk about a pendulum. And in many instances, it's applicable. And in this case, it's true. The pendulum swings too far. And it has gone too far. And somewhere in the middle is where we need to have it. And I don't know how we get back to that, because he's absolutely right. It's gone too far. And teachers now have almost no tools when it comes to discipline, and the result is the kids know it. 902-405-6000. What is your take on that? Do you have any solutions when it comes to school discipline, folks? Again, I would suggest that going back to the days of being able to hit kids is not where we want to go. For, I think it's pretty evident reasons, abuse of authority, whatever it might be. But conversely, you have to empower teachers somehow. I don't know what the answers are. 902-405-6000. George, hello.
Hey, Todd, how are you?
Well, you?
I'm well, thank you. So I'll start with Kearney first. I didn't vote for Kearney. Didn't want Kearney, and but I agree with you. I think he did what he had to do when he was there. What I do think, though, is I think he sold himself, as an elbows up, like he was going to, stick up, and that's how he came across when he was running. And I think he did the right thing when he went down. I think it was the right choice. You can't really, bully Trump. But, he didn't sell himself that way, in my opinion, but he did the right thing. Okay. But what I'm calling for is more the elder fisheries. I listen to the radio station every day, and I notice your news reports come in. And a few weeks back, I remember you had a news report about a couple that had been granted authority to fish that particular river. But when they showed up, they couldn't get on the river because there was too many, people there. Yeah. They called the authorities, and the authorities didn't come out. And then the next week, I noticed that you had the chief of I'm not sure what band it was, but he was stating how happy he was with the way that they've divvied out the areas, and it stopped a lot of that controversy there. And I mean, I get the indigenous thing, and I get history, but it seems like they were pretty fair in what they give. I think they gave 18% of the quota to the indigenous people, which is 5% of Nova Scotia's population, which is fine. But it seems that the things that I notice is that the authorities don't seem to go and touch, one side, and they're outright saying that they're just not going to listen to the law. They're just going to do what they want. And this seems like I'm not a fisherman, but this seems like a problem that they need to sort of, I don't know, buckle down on, I guess. Yes. They need to get the authorities out there and start, I get the social dynamic of it, but the law is the law. I get the history, but this is Canada now. You're living here. The law is the law, and people should have to follow that.
Yeah, it's completely gotten out of control, and DFO won't enforce the law because they're intimidated and they don't have the tools. It's literally taking your life into your own hands, going out there and to fish these elvers now. And this is what happens when to the point where laws are ignored and rules are no longer applicable. We enter into anarchy. And that's basically what's going on the rivers today, and it's happening in the lobster fishing as well. And from what I've heard from elder fishermen and people who are in the know, it's people not only local indigenous people that are doing this, and they have more certainly a right than, but it's people from all over from coming up from Maine and from other parts of the country who are doing this poaching as well. And again, people are intimidated. There have been death threats. And it's really spiraled out of control, George. It's a desperate situation.
Yeah, I think they should probably maybe get some RCMP to head out with them and then maybe start getting this thing under control.
Yep, something's got to happen, or somebody will get killed. That's eventually going to happen.
And then we're looking back saying we really should have done something.
Yep. And the conservation of the species as well needs to be the species needs to be protected. We can't just have fishing with no limits.
Yeah, agreed.
Okay, George. Thanks for the call.
Thank you. Yeah, bye.
All right, take care. 902-405-6000. We'll be back with your call. All right, continuing with your calls. The way to reach us is 902-405-6000. Again, 902-405-6000. Quick email from Gail, then back to the phones. Gail says this is finally a Canadian who's playing a clever game of chess and not hockey with the U.S. president. Carney's performance in the Oval Office was a masterclass of sophisticated statesmanship and diplomacy similar to Francis Macron and UK Starmer. Elbows and cross-checking aren't going to help Canada in this engagement. Leave the hockey and raised elbows to the ice. Canada needs to play smart, long game with Trump. It comes from Gail. 902-405-6000. That's the way to reach us. John, hello. Hi, John.
Hey, Todd. Just wanted to chat or talk about the guy there this morning from that rental association, with these guys.
Yeah, Kevin Russell.
So hard to get into. Yeah, Kevin Russell. So fixed term leases, he said, I think he said 2% of the market, but it might be a little bit higher, but it was definitely less than 5%. And he says that his association survey, which are inherently biased and self-serving,
sure,
that if they get rid of the fixed-term leases, they're going to leave units empty, repurpose buildings, sell buildings. Essentially, the sky is falling, right? But it doesn't make any sense. If fixed-term leases make up such a small percentage of total rentals, how could the removal have such a large impact, causing them to do the impacts that they say they would do?
So you don't buy what he's saying? That's what you're telling me, John?
Oh yeah. I don't buy a lot of what these guys say. They cherry pick and give you information. When you press them on the 12-month and the fixed-term leases, he talked about four-month leases for people with no credit, helping them out. But, give us the number. Like, what's the real number? What percentage of the fixed-term leases are 12 months? I would suggest that there's probably most of them. Is it all abuse? No, but there is a lot of it. So that's all. I just wanted to give a counterpoint on the points from the talking head.
John, I would also suggest, though, that perhaps that the other side of the coin, the other argument, could be clouded as well when it comes to statistics, right?
Oh yeah, I missed the interview where that person from Acorn, I think it was, said it was 460%.
Yeah.
I don't think that's true either. This is the problem. It's hard to get. Everybody has information, but they won't share all the information they had. Kevin talked about, they don't have the right information. But if the government or the province or the city or whatever went to that association, said, share us our data, he'd be on your show saying that it's onerous, it's costing us money, and it's overreach and all these other things, right? So it's hard to find the truth, I guess, like your caller said earlier, talking about the guy with the cell phone study.
Yeah. Okay, John, appreciate the call.
Okay, thank you.
All right, take care. 902-405-6000. David, hello.
Good morning, Todd.
Hi there.
I want to talk about hockey.
Okay.
You're the right guy to be talking to.
All right.
I'm a diehard hockey fan.
Okay.
Okay, now, it's really amazing what Toronto is doing. Getting off the first stop at the first period, scoring first, that is totally amazing. And I think Nylander is going to be getting a hat trick soon. And isn't it any wonder why Pacioretty is wearing number 67.
Well, I'm not sure why. Why do you say, what's the relevance of that?
If he wasn't wearing 67 and wearing another number, I think he'd change the whole total of the game altogether. I think he's reminding everybody on the team when they won the last cup.
Oh, I see. I get your point.
Yeah, bingo. That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, maybe, I don't know, perhaps.
It could be a little superstition there.
Yeah, I would say more than a little superstitious, quite superstitious. I had not made that connection. The Leafs, of course, last won the Stanley Cup in 1967. That's your reference, right?
And I think Joseph Wall's going to be taking over because I don't think Stolarz is going to be coming back. If he does, we're lucky.
Well, you never know. But Wall is definitely up for the task, that's for sure.
Yeah, and he's made a few good saves there. And I am a Habs fan, but I'm kind of getting on the bandwagon for Toronto.
Well, there you go.
Alrighty, so there's a couple good things there for you.
Okay, thanks, David. Appreciate the call.
All right.
Take care.
All right, bye-bye.
All right, 902-405-6000. I will say that Pacioretty has been a great addition to the team. He's a veteran for sure, 36 years old, I think he is. But again, secondary scoring and not relying on that top line all the time is key. You look at any great Stanley Cup playoff team, and they always have depth, always right from the first line down to the fourth line, and great defense as well. And I think the Leafs are certainly a lot closer to that version of a team than they have been. Their defense looks pretty solid. I think Joseph Wall is look, it's too bad that they lost their starter, but Wall is not bad. He's got some playoff experience and he's proven that he can get it done in the playoffs. So things look good right now for the Leafs, up 2-0 against Florida. We shall see. I certainly hope Stolarz comes back. First and foremost for his health, but secondly for the team. All right, this email from Roy, by the way, give us a call, 902-405-6000. Again, 902-405-6000. Somebody called and talked about Alberta and separation and what might need, I think it was Bill. Bill was asking the question, what needs to happen in order for Alberta or any province to be able to secede from the Union? Roy says, the process of a referendum on separation is governed by the Federal Clarity Act of 1998. The federal parliament passed the legislation after the 95 Quebec referendum. The act requires the referendum question to be clear and unambiguous and supported by 60% of voters. So that comes from Roy. Look, I'm not overly concerned about Alberta leaving, to be quite honest with you. I think that it's a heated argument and a heated debate right now, and Alberta and regionalization and the West in general, I think, has not gotten the best deal when it comes to the rest of the country and from the federal government. And I understand their grievances. That said, though, folks, you say go to the United States, they'll leave for the U.S. I think that might be dreaming in Technicolor for a lot of reasons. I think that is an easy thing to say, but not easy to implement. And when all is said and done, do Albertans want to become Americans? Certainly some of them do. But when the rubber meets the road, what percent of Albertans would actually want that? I would bet it would be pretty low, because it would be a pretty daunting situation for a lot of reasons. Again, some Albertans would be all for it. As far as them being their own nation, I don't know, folks, landlocked. And you could say, well, they've got the United States, which they could export their oil to. Well, they're doing that now, right? And you could say, well, they keep all the revenues to themselves. Well, that's true. I get it. But there are a lot of downsides. And first and foremost, the First Nations communities and their say in all of this would be at play. 902-405-6000. Kyle says this via email referencing school discipline. Says it's upsetting to hear so many people discussing increasing discipline in schools, yet not a single person has discussed the lack of child mental health supports, particularly a lack of funding for mental health workers in schools. 902-405-6000. Barry says this is Max Pacioretty wore number 67 his entire career. So there you go. The conspiracy as to why he's wearing 67 is because he's always worn 67 his entire career. It just so happens to be the last time the Leafs won the Cup in 1967. Is there some type of serendipity at play or some cosmic thing happening? The stars aligning? Well, I don't know that because Pacioretty's wearing 67, that means that the Leafs are destined to win the Cup. But I suppose we'll take any good harbinger, any good signal we can take. And Nylander will keep wearing that brown suit, and Wall did not crumble on Game 3. On to Game 3 tomorrow, rather. And for those who don't know, hockey players and athletes are notoriously superstitious. And Nylander wore a brown suit 3 games ago when he scored and had multiple points. So he wore the brown suit in Game 1 against Florida, the same exact suit, because he's again superstitious, and it'll likely be on again tomorrow night when they play. I think it's tomorrow night when they play in Florida. 902-405-6000. What is on your mind on this Thursday? We've got some open lines for you folks. Give us a call. Want to hear from you. Again, 902-405-6000. We'll continue with your calls when we come back.
Thanks.
All right, taking your calls, 902-405-6000. A couple of emails and back to the phones. Again, 902-405-6000 is the way to reach us. Ken says this, reference Crown Land, says in Canada, Crown Land is owned by either the federal or provincial governments. While the monarchy technically owns all land, the authority to manage it is divided between federal and provincial crowns. This means that the land is not owned privately, but is held in trust by the government for the benefit of the public. Thanks for sending that along. Mark says this, reference Mark Carney. Says, as a conservative voter, I hope Carney can turn this country around, but I'm highly skeptical based on the past 10 years. But I can honestly say that I hope he can turn a page. Our future as a country depends on the next few months. And that was fundamentally the argument, or one of the key arguments against Mark Carney and the Liberals, of course, was that you're basically getting more or less the same thing you've got for the last 10 years. And I would suggest that although there's some truth to that, the leadership style between Justin Trudeau and Mark Carney is a complete 180. I would say now some would say that their views on the green sector and whatever align. I think that when it comes to leadership and diplomacy and skill set, I see quite a difference between Justin Trudeau, who is. I've said this before, and I'll repeat it again. I think we'll go down as one of the worst prime ministers this country's ever seen. I know that's harsh, but that's how I feel. And I think that, and I've said this before, that Mark Carney, although imperfect for sure, and he's got his warts, like everybody does, is a pretty big upgrade from Justin Trudeau. Just my take, as I always say. What's yours? 902-405-6000. That is the way to reach us. Again, 902-405-6000. Let's see here. Where are we going next? Again, 902-405-6000. That's the way to reach us. Sean, hello.
Hey, Todd. So maybe I'm way off on this, but here's what I have a problem with, is Trump did not offer to buy this country. He offered to annex this country. You had people calling this station thinking that the United States was going to invade us. They were taking us over, military force. They were trying to cripple us. There was no offer of buying Canada. So when Carney said it's not for sale, I think that's where I took offense to, because there was no offer. It was invade us or cripple us or crush our country into submitting to the U.S. So I that's what kind of started the throw off to me. And he had everybody in this country saying that we don't need the States, the United States needs us, they're dependent on us, there's no surplus, we don't need them, we got offers around the world. So I was expecting Carney to go into this meeting with nothing to lose, Todd. I don't understand this. Oh, well, he did the right thing by doing what he did. But what did he have to lose? He
Sean,
told us that
Sean, let's face it. There's
nothing.
Sean, let's face it. There's nothing he could have done that would have pleased you. There's really nothing he could have done that would.
That's not true, Todd.
Yes, it
At
is.
least he could have stood up for himself a little more. Todd, like I said yesterday, Trump spoke for 29 minutes and Carney spoke for 3.
Well, I'm not sure
of
what
that
else.
whole meeting.
Yeah.
Right? And here's the second thing that really, really ground my gears is Mark Carney supposed to be the finance guy, the numbers guy, the be-all, end-all of economies. And Trump stated a few times very clearly that Canada is dependent on us. We have a huge trade surplus, and we're subsidizing Canada. How come he didn't challenge that? He's the guy that's supposed to be the one to challenge that.
Sean, all I can tell you is that is this, okay? If he would have said anything contradictory or anything bombastic or anything aggressive at all, Trump would have shut him down. Carney would never have got a word in edgewise, and it would have deteriorated into a complete disaster. So it's easy for you to sit there. It's easy for you to sit there and say he should. It's easy for you to sit there and say he should have done this, he should have done that. But what's the reality? You got to deal with reality, Sean, in my opinion.
But God, he's supposed to be the finance guy. He's supposed to be the guy above Trump, that he deals with Trump. He's supposed to say to Trump, listen, your figures are wrong. I'm sorry. And let's then go to the media afterwards and say, look, he's lying. These are the numbers. It's very simple.
He has done that.
But how come he didn't confront him? And
I already explained, Sean. Why? I already explained why. Why I feel. It's of my opinion that would not have worked. You disagree with me.
Yes, because this is why Canada's in the position is because people forget months like what happened. Like Todd, people were like, I was ready to go to and fight for saving Canada and keep it on the soil. So I was upset when Trump said this. And I support Trump. You know that. But when he started talking about, I got offended. And when he said, Canada's not for sale. Well, nobody offered to buy it, man. He offered to come and take it and cripple us. And this is the thing is people forget about this. Like they say he did this great diplomatic thing. No, he did not.
Well, in my opinion, in my opinion, Sean, Sean, wait a minute. In my opinion, and we're going to agree to disagree with this, okay? You feel as though he did a horrible job and should have went in there yelling and screaming and elbows up or whatever.
That's a lie. That's a lie. He didn't need to yell.
Why do you always say lie? Why do you always say lie? It's not a lie.
Because you're putting words in my mouth. Then you're putting words in my mouth.
Okay.
Because he didn't need to go in there yelling and screaming at all.
What did he need to do then?
He could have said, Mr. Trump, those numbers that you're spewing to this audience are wrong. And here are the facts.
And how would that have gone over? Sean?
Who knows?
Oh, I think we all know how it would have gone over. I think we all know how it would have gone over.
Quiet. Yeah, okay, but then you could have let Trump do his thing, and then you could have went to the media and said, look, this guy's crazy. I just put the numbers on it, and see, a liar always yells and screams and kicks. I could have sat there with a straight face and told him the numbers, and Trump could have done his
okay, all right, okay.
And then he could have went to the media and said, look, here's the proof.
Great.
He is lying.
You made your point.
Lying.
You made your point. Thanks for the call. Appreciate it. 902-405-6000. Look, I disagree. Fred, hello.
Yeah, Todd, I disagree too. Holy shit. Anyway, I thought Carney did an awesome job with the President of the United States. I don't think there is anything else that he could have possibly done than what he did. I watched a good discussion last night with a former ambassador to U.S. ambassador to Canada. He said he did exactly what he should have done. And he says, in order to get rid of the tariffs, he says, what you have to do is explain to President Trump how it's bad for the U.S., not how it's going to hurt Canada, but how it's going to hurt the U.S. and how it's going to impact the market and how it's going to, have this ongoing thing that's just not going to get him to where Mr. Trump needs to be. And he said that he started that and he laid the groundwork for that. And I think he's doing an exceptional job. On the other side of the thing, you had, I think as Angela said, the elbows up thing.
Yeah.
You shouldn't be doing. Well, that's for us. That's for the provinces. That's not for the federal government that's dealing with President Trump. That's for us to say, yeah, we're going to buy elsewhere. We're 40 million people in Canada, and we'll buy Mexico. We'll buy U.S. We won't buy U.S. We'll buy everything else. And if you don't think it's working on the sports side of things, Seattle and Toronto are supposed to play this weekend. Half of the stadium down in Seattle has not been purchased. The Canadians are not going down there, so much so that there was an article this morning that said that the hotels were offering for them to come down for Canadian at par. Their money would be taken at par to stay down in the U.S. hotel for the Seattle-Toronto game. So that gives you an idea how they're feeling the pinch down there. That's just one observation.
Well, the reality, Fred, the reality is this, is that Donald Trump, look, it's easy to say that Mark Carney should have done this, should have done, Donald Trump's not going to listen to anybody, but when all is said and done, if the electorate completely turns on him and Republicans start to turn on him as well, that's the only way that's the only thing that's going to reverse course on this. That's it.
That's it. That's all there is to it. You said it right there in one sentence.
Yeah. Okay,
well,
Fred.
some people like.
Yeah.
Anyway,
thanks
I'll
for the
let
call.
that go, and go Leafs go.
Go Leafs go. You got it. 902-405-6000. Doug, hello.
Hi, Sean. I'm calling you Sean. Sorry about that, Todd. No, I just want to make a quick comment. I didn't even vote for the Liberals, and I was pretty impressed with Carney. But I just want to remind Sean. Pierre Poilievre was saying Canada wasn't for sale.
Yeah.
Zing was saying they were not for sale, and so was Carney and others. And some of the premiers are doing the exact same thing.
It's just a turn of phrase, is all it is, right?
Yeah,
it's not to read anything into it other than it's a turn of phrase. That's all it is.
Exactly. You were right. There's nothing he could have said that would have satisfied Sean. You can take that for what it's worth.
Okay.
Thanks,
all right. Thanks for the call. Take care. Quickly, Lawrence, if you can, quickly.
Yes, I just wanted to say that my impression was of Carney and that visit was I was really quite impressed. He acted like a statesman in it for the long game. I really get really frustrated listening to people such as Sean. He's a political supporter with blinders on, and he's just not worth listening to. That's all.
All right. Thanks for the call. Look, I'm not. I appreciate everybody's perspective and point of view. I do, and I get it. But it's. I honestly don't think there's anything that Mark Carney could have done that would have garnered the support of hardline conservative supporters. There's nothing he could have done. He could have gone in there and been bombastic. He would have been criticized. He could have gone in there and did exactly what he did and been criticized. There's nothing. So what did he do? Look, I consider myself a nonpartisan person. I know some of you don't believe that, but I'm just being honest with you. And I'll call a spade, and I'm willing to do so, and I'm willing to criticize and be critical. I was highly critical of Trudeau and the Liberals, big time. And I think, based on what I witnessed, Mark Carney did all that he could have done and all that could have been expected for him to do under the circumstances. I really do. In a perfect world, would it have been nice for him to have his say and have Donald Trump sit there and listen? Sure, but that's not reality. That is just not reality, folks, in my humble opinion. Thanks for the calls, everybody. We appreciate it very much. Medical wait times cost Atlantic Canadian patients up to $6,500, the highest in Canada. That when we come back. Long waits for surgery and medical treatment cost Atlantic Canadians the most nationwide, up to $6,500 per patient due to lost wages and productivity last year, according to a new study by the Fraser Institute. Joining us to discuss all of this is Nadeem Esmail, Senior Fellow at the Fraser Institute. Nadeem, thanks for joining the show. We appreciate your time.
Thank you so much.
All right, first off, why is this important information for people to know about?
We know waiting has become a defining part of the Canadian healthcare experience, and there are any number of effects that will have on individuals. Of course, there's the pain and suffering. There is the risk of poorer outcomes. There is a risk of adverse event. There's also the risk of mortality as a result of a longer wait. There may be other consequences. But there's also lost time as individuals are unable to engage fully in their lives. And so what this study seeks to do is it seeks to try and value the amount of time that's lost as patients are unable to fully engage in their lives while they're waiting for necessary care.
All right. So why is it more acute here in our region?
There are two things at play here. It's a combination of both wages and the amount of time waiting. And the big issue, of course, for the Maritimes is the wait times. If you look at the wait time in New Brunswick, the total wait time in 2024 is almost 70 weeks from general practitioner referral to treatment by a specialist compared to a national average of 30. And more specifically in this study, because we're looking only at the second wait from specialist to treatment, it's 35.4 weeks in New Brunswick compared to a national average of 15. Those lengthy wait times drive much higher costs in terms of the consequences of waiting.
Okay, so when all is said and done, I guess, how do we turn this thing around?
I think we need to start looking around the world and stop focusing on how we can get more government or even more money into an already well-funded government-dominated healthcare system. The answer is clear. If we look to countries like Switzerland and Germany and the Netherlands, where we see really very short waiting times and none of the systemic waiting that occurs in Canada, we see all of the policies that are often sold as anathema to healthcare in Canada, but working very effectively. Private competition in the delivery of services to get more efficient and higher quality services for a better cost. Cost sharing to encourage more informed patient decision making about when and where it's best to access the healthcare system, and a private alternative for when patients are not feeling well served by the public system. Those policies together have very effectively reduced wait times around the developed world, and certainly can do so here in Canada, if only we can get over the political barrier to reform.
Okay, I was going to ask you about the roadblocks, and why is it such a political barrier?
There is, I think there's been a years and years and years of ideas built up in Canadians' heads that these reforms will actually lead to a poorer healthcare system. And it's often sold by defenders of the status quo who, in many cases, may be benefiting from a very expensive healthcare system that delivers relatively few services to Canadians. But those vested interests are wrong. Really, we need to start moving down the path of reform, and we need to get past these ideas that the Canada Health Act has created a perfect healthcare system that just needs even more money or an even greater focus. The reality is it's structured incorrectly. It's structured incorrectly under the rules of the Canada Health Act imposed by Ottawa, and it's structured incorrectly under the rules that the provinces have set outside of the Canada Health Act in terms of how we pay hospitals and who owns those hospitals and operates them.
Okay, one of the arguments that you hear about implementing some private health care is that takes resources away from the public from the public service. What's any validity to that?
Let's look at how this is done around the developed world. In Sweden, in the early 1990s, one of the major hospitals, St. Gorans in Stockholm, was handed over to a private sector operator to operate. And a new funding system was put in place where money followed patients to the hospitals. Hospitals were no longer just given budgets to look after people. They actually got money for every patient they treated. The results were remarkable. They got 11% more healthcare for 1% fewer dollars. And the private hospital in the region was now seen as a beacon of efficiency, driving efficiency and quality at other hospitals competitively. They got more healthcare for the dollar. They got better healthcare for the dollar simply by changing the ownership structure of one hospital and changing the way money flows through the system. These are reforms that work clearly in practice.
Okay, so why is it a difficult sell?
I think it's a difficult sell here because there are so many in Canada who very loudly oppose these sorts of reforms. They talk about how this is the Americanization of healthcare, which it is absolutely not. They talk about how this will cost more and deliver less services, which is not at all the experience around the developed world, where other countries have delivered more healthcare and better healthcare for the dollar than Canada. And those voices are very vocal. And I think that puts a fear in the hearts of Canadians who, of course, want a high-quality universal access healthcare system, who would not want to see universality deteriorate. The reality is, though, this is how we get better universal access to healthcare services, better universal care for everyone through competition and better aligned financial incentives for how money flows through the system.
Yeah, and of course, the healthcare system is already got all types of private practice involved, eyewear, dental, although there are some moves from the federal government to address dental care, but it's not as though it's not physiotherapy, chiropractors, none of that, or most of that's not covered through the public system, right?
Absolutely. And so many of these sectors work so well and so efficiently. In many ways, I think the federal government is going the wrong direction here. What we really need from the federal government is to step back, take the rules and handcuffs off the provinces in policy terms, reduce the financial leverage they have against the provinces, and really allow the provinces to free themselves and innovate. If provinces choose to not do so and continue with the long wait times and high spend performance, so be it. But other provinces in Canada may choose differently, may choose to go down a European or Australian path of reform and really deliver on the promise of high-quality care regardless of ability to pay. And that, I think, is where the path is for Ottawa. And for the provinces, the reform path is clear. Follow the lessons from other developed countries that are simply doing a better job at universality than we are.
Okay, might there be said for something about the demographics of the country or the geographical size of the country? Does that play a factor at all when it comes to these statistics that you're referencing?
Canada has a relatively young population, although we're moving closer and closer to the average as time progresses. That doesn't make us anything special, unique, or different. And yes, we have a vast geographical landmass, but so does Australia, and very similarly distributed to us. Our population is tightly clustered along the southern border. In Australia, the population is tightly clustered along the southeast border, along the ocean front. In both nations, we have universal access healthcare systems. In Australia, they spend less than we do. They have shorter wait times than we have, and they have private competition and private alternatives and cost sharing for healthcare services. Here in Canada, we spend more, we wait much longer, we have far worse access to medical technologies like MR and CT, and we have none of those policies in place. The Australians, with a similar geographic problem to us, have done much better with the right policy construct in place.
Why do you feel as though this is such a partisan issue? And to me, and do you agree that it's a partisan issue?
I think it's become a third rail of politics. There's one premier quite famously many years ago who said it's always politically prudent to wrap yourself in a Canadian flag and proclaim yourself the defender of Medicare. And I think that just comes to this idea that's been sold to Canadians, this incorrect idea that any departure away from government ownership of hospitals, from zero cost sharing at the point of access to the healthcare system, from a government monopoly in healthcare, any move away from that is abandoning universality. And I think that idea has very much taken hold and continues to be sold by defenders of the current healthcare system. The reality is otherwise, but politically you have to have enough Canadians understanding the reality of healthcare before a politician feels comfortable and safe moving so they know they won't be turfed out on the next election.
Yeah, I think that the term universality kind of gets conflated with a completely publicly funded system without any variation, right? What are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. The term single payer, where only government should be funding healthcare services. The reality is that allowing people to leave the system on their own terms with their own resources to a private parallel sector first frees up some room in the queue for those who choose not to do so. We can also get better use out of our physicians who we know have some idle time in the evenings, on weekends, who may not be operating to their full capacity. We do have unemployed surgeons and specialists in Canada who cannot get operating time right now in the system. So despite all of the problems we have in Canada, there is some capacity that could be tapped in a parallel sector and free up some resources to focus on the patients who remain in the public system. It's a safety valve. But I absolutely agree. The idea of universality has somehow become conflated with government domination and control and monopoly, which is an incorrect understanding of how universality can best be approached and delivered.
Yeah, when all is said and done, the average person out there, circling back to this, who's on a wait list, they don't care how it gets rectified. They just want to get the operation.
Absolutely. When it comes time to get the healthcare, it doesn't matter who's delivering it. It only matters that it's delivered in a timely fashion at the highest possible quality at reasonable cost to the taxpayer who's funding those services. And the lessons from Sweden, from Switzerland, Germany, the Netherlands, Australia, Japan, across the developed world, the lessons are absolutely clear. The Canadian model is a failing model, and as we move away from it towards more private competition in the delivery of services, a better money following the patients through the healthcare system, a better focus on financial incentives, with a guarantee of universality, an appropriate role for government ensuring that, we will get a better universal access healthcare system with shorter waiting lists. We have the longest waiting list in the developed world, in spite of the fact that we spend more than just about everybody else on healthcare.
Nadeem, I appreciate your time. Of course, this is available for public consumption online if they want to check it all out, I'm assuming.
Absolutely. Everything we've spoken about is available at www.fraserinstitute.org.
Okay, thanks, Nadeem. We'll talk again.
Thanks for having me on the show.
All right, take care. Nadeem Esmail, Senior Fellow with the Fraser Institute. And the search for two missing children in northeastern Nova Scotia has been scaled back. You know all of this, so we'll get the latest from Robert Parker, the warden of the municipality of Pictou County, when we come back.
Facts.
All right, the search for two missing children in Nova Scotia has been scaled back. Police say there's little chance that 4-year-old Jack Sullivan and 6-year-old Lily Sullivan are still alive in the wooded area around Lansdowne Station almost a week after they disappeared. Joining us to talk about all this is Robert Parker, warden of the municipality of Pictou County. Robert, thanks for joining the show.
You're welcome, Johnny.
All right, so I guess I'm not sure what else we can add to this other than what's already been said, but what's the atmosphere like in the community?
I would say yesterday with the announcement that they were scaling back, that it wasn't unexpected. Most people felt that if you look for 6 days and haven't come up with even a hint of anything, that probably there's nothing there to find. That's what most people are thinking, and therefore they're using their imagination now to try and find out what did happen to little Jack and little Lily. That's the big concern, and I think people really want this answered, and I take some faith in what Staff Sergeant Curtis McKinnon said yesterday at their press conference. We're not leaving. We're not giving up. We're going to bring those little ones home. And we would like to bring them home alive, but if that's not the case, we still want them brought home. I think that's the feeling in the county at this point, and everybody has their own ideas of what they think happened to these little ones, but nobody really knows. I'm in a noisy hotel lobby here, so sorry for the noise.
No problem. You sound fine. So to the rumors and the speculation, that must be tearing the community apart in some ways, I'm assuming.
It does when people go beyond a certain point. It's human nature to kind of come up with your own ideas and the talk between neighbors and whatnot. But when it gets to the level as it does on social media, sometimes it's nasty and, things that should not be said without people knowing facts. And that's the hurtful part. And unfortunately, that always happens in society. We have to look past that and remember that most people are just caring a lot for these little ones. I've said before, they've been on the pictures and TV and the papers and everything so much that they feel like they're our children. All of Pictou County feels like it's our children at this point. And so we're heavily invested in, finding those little ones whatever way possible.
Yeah, and of course, all the volunteers and everybody that is stepped up. I mean, and not enough can be said about the efforts from all of those people, including of course officials.
Everybody, from the RCMP, I've heard some criticism of the RCMP, and that's easy to do. That's quarterbacking from your living room chair. You're not out in the woods, but the search and rescue from all over this province and from beyond the province up into New Brunswick are here, and the firefighters, just all the groups threw everything they had at this, and I don't think there's nothing else they could have added. They had the dogs, they had the drones, they had the helicopters, they had the new Nova Scotia Guard, they had everything. The Salvation Army was a great help to be there helping to feed them. Just like I said before to others, these are the heroes. They may not have gotten the result they wanted, but it sure wasn't for lack of trying.
Okay, so when they say that the search has been scaled back, how much are people still looking?
To the best of my knowledge, from what I heard, the RCMP are the ones that are still working. They're, of course, carrying out a two-pronged or maybe three-pronged, investigation. They're still looking at certain spots where they have, feelings that maybe they could have missed something, could have missed even some clues. But to this point, I don't even think they found any clues. But then there's also, investigations. Is there any criminality here? So they're investigating that as well. So they're going at it from several angles. But I think it's pretty well scaled back to RCMP, the search and rescue people. They could only stay so long once the chances of finding them alive were maybe dwindling very fast. They needed to get home to their families. They needed to go home to their jobs. I know if they thought there was even an iota of a chance of finding those little ones alive in the woods, they would have stayed. But it comes to some point you have to accept the reality that after 6 days, that's probably not going to happen. So people are trying to be patient, I think, and wait and see what the RCMP come up with. But I don't think anybody's going to be at ease in this county or this province or across the country until we have answers on what happened to our two little ones.
Indeed. Okay, Robert, listen, I know it's very difficult times, and I appreciate you taking the time to join the show and discuss it. Thank you.
Well, I thank you for putting it on the airwaves.
Okay, take care. It's Robert Parker, the warden of the municipality of Pictou County, and again, just desperate situation. And it's just very sad, folks. It's just extremely sad. It goes without saying, for sure. All right, somebody sent me an email with a link to a Huffington Post story, and it's concerning Mark Carney and his visit, and the effectiveness of his trip to the Oval Office in talking to Donald Trump. And I'll read just a bit of the story. It says, President Donald Trump backed away from his keyboard warrior trolling in his first meeting with Canada's new Prime Minister, saying his month-long threat of annexing the nation as the 51st state would only happen if Canadians wanted it, even as he continued pushing the outlandish premise undergirding his trade war with Canada and every other nation. And, of course, Mark Carney, for his part, made clear more than once that it was not going to happen. And look, like I said before, folks, I get it that there are people out there that are upset that the Liberals won this election, that Mark Carney is the Prime Minister. I get it that Mark Carney has his issues, and he's far from nobody's perfect. And I get it that for the most part he's going to be dealing with the same Liberal cast of characters that in many ways made very, very poor policy decisions. But I can't help but defer back to leadership. And the guy at the top is changed. And there is a massive difference, in my opinion, between Mark Carney and Justin Trudeau. A massive difference. Now, people say read his book, and you'll find out that he is a world globalist, World Economic Forum guy, the green, all that stuff. Set all that aside. What happened in the White House, the Oval Office, yesterday or the day before? Again, in my humble opinion, I know I'm being repetitive here, but I can't envision any other scenario in which things could have gone any smoother than they did. And it's easy to say he should have interjected and he could have done more. I think that he struck the right balance. And again, that's not from somebody who's cheerleading for Mark Carney. I would have said the same thing if it were Pierre Poilievre or anybody else who went in the Oval Office and conducted themselves in the exact same way. My take would be exactly the same. I just don't know what else you could expect from him under those circumstances. Very, very difficult circumstances. The lines then, literally and figuratively. This story on the CBC website, academic leaders condemn Nova Scotia bill as a threat to university autonomy. That when we come back. This story recently on the CBC website, new legislation affecting post-secondary institutions in the province drew the ire of members of the Canadian Association of University Teachers at a meeting recently in Ottawa. Joining me to discuss this is Peter McGuinness, president of the Canadian Association of University Teachers. Peter, thanks for joining the show. We appreciate your time, of course.
Good afternoon, Todd. Nice to be joining you again.
All right, so let's talk about the act itself and the legislation itself. What are I guess give everybody an overview of what this is about.
Yeah, this is a bill that the Houston government introduced in February and then pushed through the legislature, of course, so they have a supermajority. And it's called the University Accountability and Sustainability Act. It has several components, but the most concerning one, and I think for our delegates in Ottawa on the weekend, was that the government now can order universities to undergo what is called a revitalization process, which on some level sounds like it wouldn't be that harsh, but it could involve shutting down programs, program redundancies, layoffs, terminations. It's not even clear exactly to what extent it could go, but we are seeing some universities in financial straits, SMU, St. Mary's in Halifax, but others, just as a result of the economic circumstances and changing patterns of student enrollment.
Cape Breton University, they've got some serious issues because of enrollment and international students, of course, down. That's huge, right?
Yeah, the Auditor General's report, which came out in March, identified CBU as another targeted and vulnerable institution because they have 77% of their undergraduate students are international students, and that is changing as the federal government limits student visas. But also that wasn't going to be a sustainable model in the long run as well. So yes, CBU has also announced cutbacks, program terminations or suspensions. And so we're going to see this probably ripple right through the province.
All right, so this was designed, according to the government, to strengthen post-secondary institution financial accountability and sustainability and align with the government's priorities. What's your response to that?
Yeah, I mean, every time we get politicians saying how to run universities, we should say that's a little bit of a red flag. It says identified a strategic connection between the social and economic priorities of the government. We're never really that clear what those are, but the legislation also says, and any other such matters as the minister requires. So that's a very broad definition. We are waiting to see what the Houston government are going to do with this. But do they really want to run the 10 universities in this province? Don't they have other business to do? I mean, I understand there's a connection between funding, but universities there's a reason they have a certain amount of independence, and that seems to work generally. So I'm worried where this is going to take us.
Okay, what percent of academic institutions now post-secondary are financed by the government, and as opposed to students and other funds, other channels rather?
Yeah, that amount's been dropping year over year. It's now under 30%, and so Nova Scotia students pay the second highest tuition rates in the country after Ontario. And a lot of that money, as you said, comes from student tuition, other fees, private donations, other sources of revenue, but it's not so much taxpayers' money. And so the idea of the accessibility of a public university is starting to become more difficult, not only at the university level, but even at the college level as well.
Under 30%, I didn't realize that it would dip that low.
Yes, it's gone down, and it's tracking a little bit similar right across the country. I mean, there's some provinces that finance more, Quebec, Newfoundland, Labrador, for example, but Nova Scotia's been lagging behind for many years. And before the Stephen McNeil Liberals, there were no friends of universities, but we were kind of hoping, I think, when people reelected the Houston government, that we would get a bit more attention, especially since the economy is going to be shaken in some form by the Trump tariffs, and that retraining and education is going to be part of the solution to this.
Okay, so aligning academic research with government priorities, fundamentally, is that something that, why is that problematic, or what's the main pushback when it comes to that?
Well, there is most of that money is federal money, so and it's sent out by what's called the Tri-Council, covers all the disciplines, and it's based on a peer review system. So academics review academics and make sure the grant applications are up to snuff, and it's sent out that way. And the provinces kick in a small amount of money, but most of that again is federal money. So we have a system that works. It's going to be a bit problematic, to say the least, if the Houston government is going to take powers that no other province has exercised and saying, really, we want to tell you where the money is going to go. What they've already agreed to is signing 2-year agreements with the universities. All the universities have signed these for the money, and it sets out various priorities. And it seems one of them is to engage in more resource extraction, fracking, which has always been controversial. And so, the universities should be able to have a certain amount of independence or evaluate things to the quality of the merit, rather than having government and politicians saying what's going to go ahead and what's not.
All right, so this legislation, we can assume that if it's since it's been enacted and drafted, that the government's going to use it. Have there been any tangible examples of them using this yet?
Not yet. Essentially, what they're doing is they're kind of wielding this as a stick. So we are seeing some reports. The 2-year agreement signed at Acadia and St. Mary's. The details are that essentially the government saying, do this, or we will invoke the legislation that was Bill 12. So most of the university presidents don't see that there's an option. But I don't know if this is going to continue. And if the financial situation, as we said, gets any worse, are they going to lean on universities and colleges even more heavily?
Okay, so any word from I don't anticipate, as you mentioned, they've got a supermajority. So any anticipation or any expectation that there'll be some type of about face on this, or rethink or retool, or what are the next steps if not?
I don't think that they're going to pull the bill. They had something similar, was a bit more restricted, called Bill 100 that came in during the mealtime. But I think really the question is not whether the bill's going to exist, is whether they're going to actively use it.
Right.
So there may be some tests. St. Mary's may be the first in line for this. My university, SNFX, has a budget deficit. It's difficult given fixed tuition rates often, or if you're getting funding less than the cost of inflation to balance those books. But I think it's going to be a try, and we're seeing this right across the country. A lot of universities are experiencing financial difficulties, and some worse than in Nova Scotia. But what is the role of government? Are they going to help us in a positive way, or are they going to really come down hard? I think that's the concern going forward.
Are there any parallels to what's happening in the United States with Trump and his battle with some post-secondary institutions like Harvard and others?
Well, part of that is it is a kind of a hate on for universities more generally. Certainly in Trump's case, yeah. he lists a whole skew of demands, and if you don't do it exactly, they pull the money, and they sometimes pull the money anyway. And so we're talking about billions of dollars. But there's also an offshoot as they're trying to cut back the size of the federal government generally. Any kind of collaborative projects involving Canadian researchers at Canadian universities are being cut as well. So this is going to be shrinking of resources more generally. So we're hoping that the Carney government, now that it's been reelected, is going to put some money into research because you're not going to make up the shortfall of U.S. funds, but at least this is part of the solution to make sure the universities are strong going forward as well.
What's the morale like for your members? I would think that it's got to be pretty low considering all the challenges that you mentioned already.
Yeah, I was just at our AGM in Ottawa, so we have over 200 delegates. It's our big meeting, and there's anxiety for sure. And in some places, it's much more open because they are being subjected to cutbacks. And we're wondering what is going to be the shape of post-secondary education. I think, it must be stressed that Nova Scotia has a very strong system. It's been really useful for the province for many decades, and it really needs to be sustained and not looked at as a kind of cost, a burden, but rather an asset. And I think that's where we need to kind of make that argument.
Okay. Are there anybody on the government side that is lobbying or that might be a champion for this message, or what are you hearing from? Is there anybody, I guess, outside of opposition MLAs that are on your side? Is the question?
Well, I mean, we haven't got much response from Brendan McGuire so far, other than to say, be calm, don't worry about it too much. I think it's more whatever is going to happen in this province is going to be coming out of the Premier's office more directly. We're hoping, again, that maybe the federal government is going to step up and offer all the provinces more support because a bit like healthcare, we've been running behind on budgets for a long time, and it sounds like a broken record, but underfunding isn't going to solve the problem. And so we will continue our political lobbying and see what we can come at. That's really our only option at this point.
Okay, Peter, appreciate your time. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
All right, take care. Peter McGinnis, president of the Canadian Association of University Teachers. The movie is called Sharp Corner. It opens in May. It's directed by Halifax-based director Jason Buxton, who will join me in studio when we come back. The movie Sharp Corner opens in Halifax May 9th, directed by Halifax-based director Jason Buxton. Sharp Corner is the story of a man's spiral as he tries to find greater purpose in his life. It follows Josh, a family man who is drawn into saving the lives of the car crash victims at the sharp corner in front of his house. As mentioned, Jason Buxton joins me here in studio, raised in the UK and Canada. He's an award-winning writer, producer, and director based here in Halifax. Jason, thanks for joining me. We appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you.
All right, so I watched the trailer, and it looks riveting, I must say, for sure. Tell us about the movie, first of all. I guess an overview.
Well, that's a great synopsis of the film. I would just add to that it's a blend of dark comedy and psychological thriller, and stars Ben Foster, Kobe Smulders.
Dark comedy, and how else did you describe it?
Psychological thriller. It's an interesting blend of those two genres, and it makes for a unique, interesting watch.
Okay, and did you write this as well?
I did.
Wow, so you wore a lot of different hats with this.
Yeah, well, I adapted it from a short story by the Canadian writer Russell Wingurski, of the same title, Sharp Corner.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, it was a really great high concept that lent itself well to a film adaptation.
How would you describe the genre
of the film?
Yeah,
I just did.
No, well, I mean, in I guess less in a more defined definition, I suppose. Thriller or.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a thriller, but it's also got dark comedic elements.
Yeah. Okay, so what inspired so you said there was a novel or a short story or a novel that.
Correct, it's a short story, and it gave me an opportunity to explore obsession. And Ben's character, he's living a life that is lacking a sense of purpose, and then they move to this house, and these accidents start happening, and then he starts to realize that he's the first responder. They live in a remote area, and it takes the paramedics and the firefighters 10 minutes to get there, and he starts to insinuate himself in these accidents that happen at that corner.
Mm-hmm.
And starts to develop a bit of a savior complex.
Where was it all filmed?
We shot towards Terrence Bay. There was a road that we found this great hairpin turn, and it was a road that we could control pretty easily because there wasn't a lot of traffic, but there was no house, so there's just a wooded area, and we luckily were able to find out who owned the property, and it was owned by the province, and they leased us the land for $150,
mm-hmm.
and we built a house in sort of an on-location set that allowed us to have this beautiful interplay between the inside and the outside.
How long was filming?
30 days in the fall of 2023.
Wow, that's quite efficient use of time, I would dare say.
Yeah, it helped us a lot that 20 of our 30 days were at one location, so we didn't have to do a lot of unit moves, and that helped us be efficient and really maximize the time that we had to shoot.
All right, tell us about the cast.
It stars Ben Foster and Colby Smulders.
Mm-hmm.
Ben from most people know him from I would say Leave No Trace and Hell or High Water. He starred opposite Chris Pine,
mm-hmm.
Chris Pine's brother in that movie. And Colby Smulders, who most people know from How I Met Your Mother.
All right. So when you're directing a cast, I guess how much autonomy do you give your actors and actresses, as opposed to what you're wanting to see, and how does that interaction work?
Well, working with actors at that level,
you
have general conversations, and then you trust them, and then you sort of tweak from take to take, and you just sort of work with them and talk generally about the characters, and those two were great. Pleasure to work with.
All right, so the editing process, is that a part of, how difficult is it to edit, I would think, because you got all kinds of takes and all types of what to leave in, what to leave out. Tell us about the editing process.
Yeah, well, for us, it was about that tone, as I mentioned at the beginning. It's that mixture of dark comedy and psychological thriller, and just sort of calibrating Ben's performance. Ben's in every scene of the movie, and he's a wonderful actor who's very intuitive, and he'll give you different variations from take to take. So there was a lot of material to work with.
Mm-hmm.
And so for myself and Jorge, my editor, it was just a matter of calibrating his performance and just finding that tone, that balance between dark comedy and thriller.
Yeah. When you watch it, when it debuts or it's screened or whatever, In the past, have you had any second thoughts, or do you doubt yourself at all as opposed to editorial decisions, or are you always, once it's done, you're happy with it and no second thoughts or second doubts?
Well, I feel good about this one. I feel good about the choices that we made. Sometimes when you shoot and there's some sort of production issues that whenever you watch those scenes, you can't help but remember the pain of those days of shooting. But yeah, we made some pretty key decisions in the movie that feel right, and so very happy with the choices that we made on this one.
Yeah. What about filming here in Nova Scotia? Obviously, the industry has really been developed and really grown a lot. And what are your thoughts on the film industry here in Nova Scotia in general?
Well, it's great. I mean, I made my first feature here, and even before that, I used to work as crew. I was a camera assistant for many years. My first job was on the movie Titanic, in fact.
Wow.
Yeah, my first entry into the industry, and it was a pretty intense one.
I'll bet, yeah.
But we have great crews here, and there was a time about 10 years ago, not quite 10 years ago, where the tax credit was being threatened, and but we're resilient, and we've really bounced back, and we have really strong crew base here in Nova Scotia.
Yeah,
so it's a great place to make movies.
And of course, a soundstage is being constructed as well, which is going to be massive.
It's in the works, yeah. Very, very pivotal, yeah.
Yeah. Well, okay, I don't want to turn this into a political conversation, but unfortunately, Donald Trump, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you about this, and talking about tariffs on Canadian production. Any concerns about that?
Well, I think everybody's concerned. I think Hollywood's concerned as well. I mean, Hollywood benefits from exporting their product more than they lose in terms of product being shot outside of the country. But really, it's more of an issue. I think tax credits are competitive. Tax credits in states like Georgia or New Jersey, not just Canada or places in Europe, but states as well have pulled production from LA, and so LA really needs to compete. And I think this is what Gavin Newsom wants, is for LA to compete with their own incentives to bring back some of production to LA.
Yeah, for sure. So how do people check the movie out? Where is it going to be available?
Well, we're screening across Canada, and it's also being released the same day tomorrow in the U.S., in Halifax at Park Lane, various spots in Toronto and Vancouver, Calgary, Montreal, across the country. And the first week is very pivotal because based on our numbers, that will expand on our theater count for week 2. So it's very important that we get the people out to see the movie in week 1.
Okay, and if people want to check out the trailer, they can just Google or YouTube Sharp Corner and Jason Buxton, and they'll find the trailer.
It'll come up, yeah. Ben Foster, Kobe Smulders, Sharp Corner.
Okay, Jason, congratulations on this, and
Thank you.
Well done, and let's have you back.
Sounds good. All right, thanks very much.
You got it. That's Jason Buxton, and the movie's called Sharp Corner, opens May 9th, and looks fantastic. I'd like to thank Vanessa Vandeness on the other side of the glass. The control board's doing a fine job as always. Thanks for listening, everybody. We're back tomorrow at 10 o'clock. See you then.